Hello, everyone. Welcome to Avaya University's Healing from Childhood Trauma. I am Andy Anderson. My partner Ike Allen and I are the founders of Avaya University and Enlightenment Village. Thanks so much for joining us. And in this event, we are talking with some really great fellow experts. We're talking with psychotherapists, doctors, authors, and more about how to heal from your experiences of childhood trauma. And today, our guest is going to be talking about healing from childhood trauma and self-differentiation. So please welcome back, since we've had Jerry on a few times now, Jerry Wise. How you doing, Jerry?
Hey, hi, Andy. I'm doing very well, and I appreciate you having me back.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And
I have gained some new friends having worked with on Avaya and the
yes.
workshops. I've had many people tell me how much they've enjoyed the Avaya workshops and conferences. And so they've given me some really good feedback from what you're doing.
Well, good. Well, thank you. Yes, we love doing this and putting out, amazing conferences for people and diving into really sometimes challenging topics like we are today. And, you were on our Breaking Free from Abandonment and Betrayal event not long ago. And yeah, so we like to do this. It's a big passion and love to partner with people like you to make it happen. So I'm going to tell everyone who don't know you, I'm going to tell everyone a little bit about you first, and then we'll dive in. So for 40 years, Jerry has been a professional in psychotherapy, family therapy, and now he is an international life coach. He specializes in coaching self-differentiation, so we'll talk a lot about that. He has been a professional musician, a pastor, therapist, consultant for family businesses, and family systems expert, in addition to being a very popular speaker. He has 150 plus videos on YouTube now, has over 1 million views. And he does, a million other things that I could mention here, but we'll dive into questions. So Jerry, what is self-differentiation, and how would learning about this help someone dealing with healing from childhood trauma?
And I think that's an important question. And a lot of people are just discovering the phrase self-differentiation. And many people I've worked with have said, gosh, I've never heard that before, or no therapist has ever used that term with me before. Why have I not heard of this before now? Well, it's been around for a while, but I really think it's kind of becoming a cutting edge for healing, growth, maturity, recovery in those worlds. It's becoming a cutting edge in that way. The world of family systems and self-differentiation. And now we have Brene Brown, who's out speaking. She's a family systems person, and she would know what self-differentiation is all about. She's smart enough, and maybe I'm not as smart as she is, she's smart enough to write her books without using those technical words like self-differentiation. But she writes the whole book about self-differentiation. That's what, and I know that's what she's coming from. She's trying to avoid the harder words, but it's sometimes hard to do in terms of that. But Harriet Lerner, who writes The Dance of Anger, The Dance of Intimacy, and all the dance books, Brene Brown, and there are other authors in the past who have utilized these concepts and this theory. And it's taking on it's getting a bigger audience, because people are realizing how just addressing ourselves and what we think or what we feel in isolation is not getting us the recovery and healing that we need and want. That if we address our feelings, our thoughts, our behavior in a systemic view, and seeing ourselves as a system, as a part of our family of origin system, that can bring about a considerable amount of healing, recovery, and maturity and growth. So if you were to ask, well, what is self-differentiation? Self-differentiation is, I think of it as kind of a word that means self-esteem or self-respect, but it adds the system in understanding that. Many times, if I just talk about self-esteem, I'm just talking about what I feel inside about me, right? Mm-hmm. That's what self-esteem is. How do I feel about me? self-differentiation is how you feel about you and how you behave and function within the system of relationships, your family of origin, your marriage, your friendships at work. So there's a whole adding of the systems notion. And self-differentiation it's really I suppose a psychological term for growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're as children, we are enmeshed and dependent upon our family of origin. And self-differentiation is the process of defining a different self. I'm differentiated from this emotional system. So I'm me and you're you. When that becomes confused or overlapped, we're enmeshed.
Mm-hmm.
When I realize I'm me and you're you, and I understand that you're on one side of the tennis net and I'm on the other, then I start getting into self-differentiation. I'm connected with you, I'm connected to you while being myself. And those two forces are very important. And if those are in balance, that's the process of self-differentiation. Now, how would it apply to childhood trauma? So what? So what has that got to do with childhood trauma? Well, guess what? If we're like this as kids and we grow up like this, enmeshed and dependent on our family of origin, which we do. And by the way, I have my fingers like this, but it's actually more connected than that. Your family of origin is in you and you are in your family of origin. Mm-hmm. So it's even closer than what my fingers are even demonstrating. The process of becoming an adult is becoming ourselves apart from the family of origin and becoming ourselves, becoming who we are. Well, what if we have trauma during this time? Do you know what it does? Watch my fingers. It does that.
Mm.
Trauma creates greater enmeshment.
Got it.
And so if you have a model or a healing model that involves self-differentiation, it will help you when that all trauma creates enmeshment.
Got it.
Husband abuse, wife abuse, family of origin abuse, any trauma. Well, let's talk about, God forbid, horrible rape.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how is the victim of rape and the perpetrator of rape, what happens to their relationship after it occurs? Are they not bonded now?
Right.
More than they want, more than, let's say, she wants to be.
Yeah.
And so she's got to deal with differentiating herself from the perpetrator. We have to differentiate ourselves from the trauma and from those perpetrators that have created all this inside of us. And so we want to get that out of us so I can be us, I can be me, mm-hmm. and not me with all this inside me or connected to all that. So that's why I think self-differentiation work is so important regarding childhood trauma. Got it. That it's if I can become me, I will less become my trauma.
Got it.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm taking a note on that. If I can become me, I can become less become my trauma. Less become my trauma. Okay, got it.
Because so many people are just their trauma. Well, then we're enmeshed with the trauma. And so if you can work with someone who understands de-enmeshment or differentiation, or that can be a key in overcoming the trauma we've experienced. Mm-hmm. Does that mean we can make it go away? Of course not. It's always going to, it happened. We can't make it not happen. But I sure want to make it where it's not a part of me. I mean, it's not directing me. It's not driving me. That's what I want to become more I think I even wrote something down. Well, and here's another way of thinking, if I can add this to that discussion. All families have a certain level of chronic anxiety. All generations, about 5 generations back till now, we have this certain level of chronic anxiety that goes within the family. And that chronic anxiety fuels the enmeshment because you don't want disapproval. You don't want, distress. You don't want to fail in other people's expectations. And that chronic anxiety keeps you not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's add trauma to this normal process or dysfunctional process, whatever. Now we're going to add trauma to that. And so what happens is now this chronic anxiety increases tenfold or whatever fold. And so now it's really hard to pull out of that and become yourself because there's so much of a desire to relieve that chronic anxiety and partake of the super self of the family, be just a part of the family. Don't be yourself. Don't be autonomous. Please, mom and dad, try to get love over here. There's just so much pressure. Now we have chronic anxiety. Now we have trauma, which just increases that anxiety tenfold. And now when I start to step out of that process, I've got anxiety up to here in stepping out of that process. If you have a coach or someone who can help you with that, you can begin to work your way out of that and go, wait a minute, I have been victimized as a trauma. I've been a victim of trauma. I'm now being myself, and I can also manage my thoughts and feelings as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that what we want to do in adulthood? But trauma messes all that up.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma throws a wrench in that whole engine. So we have chronic anxiety. And in fact, one way you can tell about whether you have chronic anxiety in your family, go home for a family gathering and be aware of how much anxiety you have.
I already know the answer to that question.
I already know the answer to mine too.
Hi there, this is Ike Allen, founder of Avaya. I wanted to take a moment and pause the Masterclass to remind you that you can experience many more teachers in the free Masterclass at avaya.com/healing. That's AVAIYA.com/healing. If you're not currently subscribed for the Masterclass, please do so now so you can experience all the available classes in this exciting series. And now, back to the Masterclass.
And also try to do something different than what you would have done in your family and see what level of chronic anxiety you have. It's probably a lot higher than you realize. Then if we add trauma, it's way, way higher. And so if you have someone who can guide you through that chronic anxiety and help bring that down, because that chronic anxiety affects the limbic, lizard brain part of reactivity, and it also affects the executive function over here. And that just becomes who we are. We are just this chronic anxiety. We think we're running our lives. No, your chronic anxiety is running your life and your trauma. So how can we work on defusing that? So I didn't mean to get off on all of it.
No, that's good. So let's talk about that. Like, how, for people watching right now, obviously coming to this event because they're dealing with healing from childhood trauma, how do they start to diffuse that? How do they, put the pieces together, get rid of de-enmeshment or whatever you would call it, right?
Right.
Like,
and the chronic anxiety and the enmeshment that's there, and how do we overcome that? A lot of the process is a process of learning to reframe or see things differently. Many times people come with a map that's not very complete about how relationships work. I was just working with someone this morning, and won't say who, and though I don't know that she'd mind, but and she was talking about how counterintuitive we were talking, that it was so not the way she would normally think. And I said, good, then we're heading in a good direction, because I don't want to talk in the way you'd normally think, because you're not going to go anywhere fast. More of the same doesn't work. And so we were talking about, the bamboo finger cuffs, when you put
Mm-hmm.
your fingers in and you try to pull.
Yep.
If you can look at your trauma, for example, somebody has trauma, and they then have this finger cuff situation with the trauma. And so what are they going to do to try to get out of the trauma?
Yep.
They're going to try to pull. If I'm there and I understand how systems works, and if I teach you about how relationships work, and you can actually push, then your finger will come out.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't feel right to us to push.
Right.
And so with trauma, what we want to do is we want to embrace the trauma, accept the trauma, see how the trauma has worked in the system as a whole, because it's not just to you, but how it's affected the whole system and how it still affects you, because it's still operating. And how can we begin to cut that circuit? That's what we want to do, is we want to cut the circuit of that and have a circuit breaker. Mm-hmm. And I think there are a number of ways to do that, from talking about it, to dealing with your feelings about it, to talking about it. There are also, of course, you can do other body things, massage, yoga, there's lots of things you can do there. But I also believe facing the fears of living traumaless.
Mm.
Because if I'm this way with the trauma, this is very scary.
Right.
Now, everybody says, oh, but I don't want to be living by my trauma anymore. I don't want to be the traumatized person. And of course they don't. I know they don't. Of course you wouldn't. The problem is, because of the system, this feels so normal and so comfortable. It's like the old pair of jeans we've always had on. Now we've just put on a new pair of jeans and they don't fit quite so well. Right. So I help them to adjust to the new pair of jeans so they can live over here to not be their trauma, because trauma ends up becoming a part of our subjective norm. It's just the norm, the trauma that I've experienced. Right. And it takes a lot of courage to imagine and envision your life traumaless. And that sounds like, oh, well, that'd be wonderful, Jerry. Why wouldn't everybody want to just try it? It's the same thing. You're in a bad marriage and your husband's just horrible. And people go, well, then she should just leave. Of course. Why doesn't she leave? And she's smart. And she knows she's not happy. She knows she's not happy with her husband or her wife or whatever. And because to leave shift you in the system so much that it doesn't feel comfortable. It doesn't feel normal. We have more anxiety. And in fact, there are downsides to the good. There's downsides to letting go of this marriage. There's downsides to letting go of the trauma too. And so in family systems world, we think about their downsides to healing from trauma. And most people think there's only good sides. No, if you can discover your downsides, you can let go of your trauma more. So
yes.
I don't know if
that's very good. Yeah, I think that's so key. So everybody watching right now, maybe you feel some resistance to that, this statement of, right, facing any fears that you might have around actually letting go and healing from the trauma. But that's an amazing, amazing thing to be aware of. Like, this is huge. And maybe this is something you've already known about yourself, but if it's something new, just let it sink in and don't beat yourself up about, right, the fact that part of you wants to stay in, right, what's normal. That's been what's normal for you, got it.
And
get it.
And we have arranged ourselves and our relationship systems around that normal.
Right.
Well, if somebody comes in and say, hey, let's change your normal, okay? And that's what I do to people every day. I say, let's change your normal. How about that? I know I'm going to face resistance and anxiety. Who wouldn't? I faced mine many times. I don't want to change normal, even though I don't like normal.
Yeah.
I don't want to change it because it's scary. It's new. It's not what I'm used to. And Thich Nhat Hanh says there is no cell of our body that does not have a wounded child in it.
Mm.
And so when I come in and go, guess what? I want us to give up that wounded inner child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, every cell in your body has that.
Right.
So that's not always good news, but it's the right news. You know, it's
Right.
the right, because that will help us heal.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can learn to live as not governed by trauma self.
Right.
You know, which that's scary as heck.
Yeah.
If you've been traumatized all your childhood, and it's like I'm asking them to, you know, be a Martian when they've lived on Earth all their lives.
Right.
And they're going, Jerry, you're asking me to be a Martian.
Right.
And I'm going, I know, I'm so sorry. You know,
Yeah.
but when you head more towards being a Martian, you're going to find more freedom, more acceptance, more love, more self-acceptance, and also more courage. And again, Brene Brown in her books and her talks all talk about courage,
Mm-hmm.
because it all takes courage, because we're dealing with chronic anxiety. That's why it takes courage.
Right.
If there wasn't anxiety, we wouldn't need courage.
Right. We wouldn't be
We
having this conversation right
we
now
wouldn't
either.
be having this conversation. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Got it.
And so that's why she talks so much about courage and a road less traveled, and being brave, she's doing all that, saying, because you have to be brave to discover the new.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, you just so want to go back to that enmeshment and fusion of the old. It just feels so normal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this normalcy of all this anxiety, and then the trauma on top of that, only increases the anxiety, and the fusion with our family of origin, our abusers, or whatever has happened. That's that normalcy is our subjectivity. Objectivity is what we see and touch. Subjectivity is how we experience the world.
Mm-hmm.
That subjectivity gets annihilated when we're in this position and traumatized. So I have the workshop that I was offering for free, the annihilation of our subjectivity.
Mm-hmm.
This gets annihilated. And so my normal is now, normal is I should be treated badly.
Right.
That's my normal, because I've been abused. So now I need to be abused now. That's my normal. That's my subjectivity.
Mm-hmm.
That's an annihilated subjectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to come back to our healthy subjectivity, and an informed and recovered subjectivity, which is, no, I was abused. I do not wish to be abused now. And I can have the courage to live a non-abusive life. It takes courage to live non-abusive life.
Mm-hmm.
That everybody goes, well, no, you should just, everybody would want to do that. Try it. Try being different than who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see how difficult that would be. And so I'm in the business of helping people to be something they aren't.
Right. Yes.
And that's a big work.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard, but it's, if they start to do it, it means everything to them. And I had a woman just recently just said, I worked with you for 3 years, and what I just had a discussion with my mom, and the words we said, it was very simple. It was no big. She said, I could have never said it with that calmness, in this way, and with this intent. She said, I can't even explain it to people, because they go, well, what are you talking about? All you said was this. They don't understand. I said that as a different person and a different daughter. That's what they don't see.
Right.
And I said, I know exactly what you're talking about. And her mother had been abusive, narcissistic, and she was able to detach herself from her mother, rather than having all this mother trauma in there all the rest of her life. She,
Right.
for a moment, was able to go, I'm me and not the trauma, and she's her. And that was a huge, huge awareness.
I love it. So since you mentioned your talk, your workshop, I want to make a quick note of that. So Jerry has a free workshop / talk for everybody today. So there's a button below this video that takes you over to a page on your website, Jerry, where they can fill out a form, I think, in order to get access to your talk. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, I have a contact page on my website, and on that contact page you could be sure to put your email address on there and type your email address properly, because I can't, or put your phone number on there, and I like it when people put their phone numbers on, and it does ask for that.
Okay.
So I can check it in case the email address comes back funny or something. Then I can always call them and go, can you give me your email address, and just request that access to that workshop on Vimeo, and I'll get that for you.
And say the name again one more time.
The Annihilation of Our Awareness.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. So
and
everybody,
it's about $100 value.
That's awesome. So yeah, everybody, there's
to folks.
That button right below, and you just click over, fill out the little form, and make sure that you mention that you'd like a copy of this free talk. And yeah, everything we've been talking about right now applies to, you know, what the work that Jerry's put into this workshop. So please go check it out if you want that free copy of that.
Hi, it's Ike again. I wanted to remind you once more that you can experience many more teachers in our free masterclass at avaya.com/healing. That's avaya.com/healing. If you're not currently subscribed for the masterclass, please do so now so you can experience all the available classes in this exciting series. And now, back to the masterclass.
Okay, so let's dive a little deeper, since we're not quite done yet. I just wanted to make a note of that since you mentioned it. So I know that we've talked already a lot about this, but if we could go a little deeper. So trauma can create, right, this lack of self or a denial of the self. So how could someone find or become a self, right? This seems like something that we would all, right, have been able to do and differentiate, like you said, but is there anything else you can say specifically about like creating that self, becoming the self?
Well, and I think, yes. And it does create a lack of self, and it does create a denial of self, which you've accurately described. And so the one of the things I do, and I encourage people, which is again very difficult for people to do, and you would think this is easy, but none of the things I do are easy. That I just keep telling people, no, it's not. It sounds simple, and if you just read in the book, you go, oh, well, of course, that's what yeah, but try doing it, and it becomes a little tougher. When they come, I want to help them make a shift from the perpetrator and from the trauma, shifting to themselves and have a self-focus. That is not easy when you've been traumatized. That is not easy. And so I want to go, okay, we're going to start working on you, how you feel triggered, what's going on inside of you, what is going on inside of you, how are you feeling, what are you thinking. We're going to start learning the difference between thinking and feeling, because for many people who've been traumatized, guess what else gets enmeshed?
Feelings
and thinking.
Yeah.
And then I end up being think-feel, or I end up feel-think. I think I'm thinking, and I think I'm feeling. But no, you're doing it all at once. And so you're just going to be reactive living. And so we want to begin to separate those processes out, because trauma has bound those together. And we want to separate those, because that's also an indicator of maturity. An adult, a healthy, whoever that normal adult, whoever they are, knows the difference between the thinking process and the feeling process. The more immature people are, the more those are bound together. And so when you talk to people who you think of as being immature, they're just reacting all the time. They're just thinking out of their feelings. They're just feeling out of their thinking. They're, and we struggle with them, 'cause you can't reason with them because they're doing feel think or think feel.
Mm-hmm.
They're not knowing the difference between feeling and thinking. And so we want to first focus on the self. We want to bring them around to focus on yourself and what's going on with you. What is happening within you? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What is your awareness, of course?
Mm-hmm.
Then we also want to add to that, how do you, as you, function in your emotional systems or in your relational systems? I meant relational systems. Also, thirdly, how is your family of origin at work in you? Well, your family of origin is still in you, traumatized or not. Your family of origin is still in you. We carry around our family of origin all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I used to do marriage and family therapy with folks in the session, there'd be the wife and the husband. And then I knew we had all of her family in the room and all of his family in the room. Then we had me in the room, plus all of my family.
Right. Yeah.
If I know all of that, I can do much better work with people. If I have a broader view of seeing all that. And so I help the client and I help the people that I work with to zoom out in their seeing of, this is you, who is that? And then how does she function in her relationship with her husband, in their marriage, in her friendships, in her church, in her work, with her family of origin? And can you begin to function as a self-differentiated adult in these systems? And I will help you do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can keep that enmeshment down, and then you will be less traumatized. For example, if I'm still enmeshed with my family of origin and the trauma that occurred there, and I'm like this, and then you and I meet and you go, well, Jerry, I just hope you don't talk too much today. What's going to happen to me?
You're going to be conflicted. You're going to potentially react to what I said based on your past.
I'm going to be reactive.
Yeah.
I'm going to be reactive. Now, you may have meant it innocently. You may even meant something by it, that you were trying to say something. It doesn't matter. I'm going to be pinged.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be pinged. You're not trying to ping me, and maybe you were, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to be.
Right.
And then if I'm pinged, now we got a problem. If I can begin to do this, then when you say that, I'm not pinged, because there's a buffer or another layer of individuation or detachment or differentiation. That's you, I'm me, you said these words, I need to evaluate those words.
Mm-hmm.
But if you notice, now I'm evaluating them and I'm observing them, I'm not absorbing them.
Right.
This person's absorbing them.
Mm-hmm.
So if we heal this, then we get to these relationships. I'm going, well, I was a little confused, Andy. What did you mean by I hope I don't talk so much? Could I ask you about that? Is that a concern you have? That's a totally different response than, well, Andy's sure a witch.
Mm-hmm.
Why is she, what's her problem? Right?
Yep.
That's my reactivity
Mm-hmm.
going on. And so we want to reduce that reactivity by reducing this enmeshment. Then I reduce the enmeshment with you even.
Right.
And I can be more even. I can be more responsive and not reactive. And so I teach people to do that. And also, if you are being reactive, we then go into, Andy's not your problem, Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
What did she ping?
Right.
Let's heal that. Not what Andy said. Whatever Andy said, Andy said. I mean, even if she was being rude, who cares?
Right.
It pinged you. Let's heal that pinging. And what did it snag? What did it snag for you? Let's do that. And then as people begin to reduce those snags, they find themselves much less reactive and go, gosh, I just feel so much more freedom. And so I'll shut up here. I'm talking too much.
Speaking of talking too much.
Ah!
No, I love it. Thank you. That's a great example. And yeah, we all have our pasts. And for people watching right now, if you start to notice that, gosh, whenever the post office person drops off the mail, I get upset. And what is that telling you? Where is it coming from? Do they remind you of someone who hurt you? Who knows, right?
And even if your husband or spouse or friend are not behaving well, I'm not saying people don't behave well all the time. I know they don't. But I still want to know, if you're not behaving well, that shouldn't force me to feel a certain way.
Yes.
If it does, that's my issue and my pinging.
Yes.
It shouldn't force me to feel a certain way.
Right.
And if it does, I want to find out, why is it forcing me to feel this way? Even though you're wrong. You may be wrong and you may be insensitive, and your husband may have said the wrong thing and been, not and been mean or insulting or, offending. But that's still not the point. If it makes me feel a certain way, then I'm still enmeshed or triangled with something.
Right.
I'm still stuck in some way. And I want to overcome that so that if somebody says, Jerry, and I remember saying this years ago, you are the worst therapist in the whole world. And I would say to them, you're right. Now, what seems to be the problem? Now, why would I say that? Because I'm not pinged.
Right, exactly.
If I were pinged, I'd be saying, now, wait a minute. I got to show you my degrees. You don't know how good wait a minute. You should. Now I'm all reactive and defending myself. And that's not their problem. That's my problem.
Exactly.
And I want to clean out those problems. And then if we've been traumatized, we even have more of that pinging going on.
Awesome. Yes. Awesome. Thank you. I love that you mentioned that, because that's something that I know pretty much anyone could relate to, I'm sure, is reacting to what people say and becoming defensive and, taking a look at where it's coming from. So we're running a little low on time. So everybody, I want to remind you, there's that button below that takes you over to Jerry's website where you can sign up for his free talk. And then there's also buttons below for Jerry's YouTube channel, where he has like hundreds of videos and all sorts of resources, as well as your website. So any last insights or anything I'm forgetting, Jerry? Anything you want to talk about briefly before we hop off?
Sure. Willis Harmon writes, we are hypnotized from infancy. We do not perceive ourselves and the world about us as they are, but as we have been persuaded to see them. And so I work on that hypnotization. I want to undo the family trance and the trauma trance, because trauma hypnotizes you too. It will hypnotize you from the trauma, and it will reset your whole subjective world. Well, we want to set that back. We want to reset that. And I believe it's possible to do that. And anybody who would like to work with me, I'd be happy to help them. Or if you want to watch my videos, you'll see that it's a thread all the way through those videos that I've made.
Thank you.
I'm very happy that you asked me to join you today.
I am very happy to have had you here and just to get to connect with you again, Jerry. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the work that you do in the world. And everybody, please look further into Jerry's work if you want to, learn more. He puts out amazing resources and content all the time, and I highly recommend it, clearly, because this is the third time we've talked. So
They can join my Facebook page also, Jerry Wise Relationship Systems. That's also my web page.
Okay.
JerryWiseRelationshipSystems.com. But the Facebook, and I have a lot of quotes and a lot of posts on those in that Facebook material and information.
Got it.
So you might find those helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. And thank you everyone for tuning in to this latest class. And here once again is to your journey to healing from childhood trauma. Bye everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Hey everyone, I just wrapped up another great class with Jerry Wise. He talked about healing from childhood trauma and self-differentiation. And as I mentioned, Jerry was on one of our past Avaya University masterclasses called Breaking Free from Abandonment and Betrayal. So go check that out if you haven't already. So self-differentiation, he mentioned this as being a psychological term for growing up, right? This is the process of us recognizing that we are a self separate from the people that brought us up, our family members, our parents, our siblings, that kind of stuff. Those family dynamics is recognizing, okay, we are this thing separate from that dynamic, from that family system. So he mentioned that if you've experienced trauma in your childhood, it creates greater enmeshment. So like he was mentioning, right, it's much harder to self-differentiate and pull away from those dynamics and all of the family history and all of that kind of stuff if you've experienced trauma. So I want to quote Jerry here. He said, if I can become me, I can less become my trauma. Again, if I can become me, I can less become my trauma. So I thought that was a really, like, my favorite quote of his entire class, and something to really sink in and, think about when you hop off. So one last thing I wanted to say was, try to take a look at separating your thinking from your feeling. Are you someone, like Jerry mentioned, that they kind of just are the same thing, or you don't know the difference between when you're having a thought versus when you're actually experiencing a feeling in your body? So this is just something to become aware of on your journey and start thinking about, start sitting with, and trying to recognize what is the difference between a thought and a feeling, if that's something that has become enmeshed for you. All right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning into this latest class, and we'll see you on the next one.